improve power supply within 3 months or face sanction, federal government tells Discos. FIRS records 10.4% increase in tax in first quarter of 2020. Nigerian airlines lose 3.5 million passengers over COVID-19. Plus, oil prices climb to $29 per barrel. This is Business Express on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA, and we're reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Muplang Dakok. Despite the sharp fall in the price of crude oil, which is Nigeria's major export and top earner, the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS) has recorded a 10.4% increase in its collection target for the first quarter of 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. A comparative analysis of the two periods shows that the FIRS collected 1.1 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2020 compared to the first quarter of 2019, when the service collected 1.04 trillion naira. A massive 568% increase in capital gains tax from 96.4 billion naira in the first quarter of 2019 to 643.9 million in the first quarter of 2020 gave the service's revenue its biggest lift. And latest statistics from the Central Bank of Nigeria indicates that the country's foreign reserves have continued downward trend, dropping by $3.02 billion from $38.53 billion on January 2nd, 2020 to $35.51 billion as of March 27, 2020. The reserves dropped from $39.8 billion on November 11, 2019 to $39.24 billion on December 13, 2019. And the dollar edged towards an almost 2% weekly rise this Friday, boosted by a surge in oil prices and as investors sought safety amid the worsening economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. Let's see how the naira is exchanging for other international currencies. As part of efforts to cushion the effects of the coronavirus pandemic in the country, the federal government commenced conditional cash transfer of monthly stipend of 5,000 naira each to the poor and vulnerable Nigerians. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, said the intervention is to reduce the suffering that people go through, especially the less privileged and the vulnerable in the society during the lockdown.
We have 1 million people, over 1 million across the country, and for the FCT, this particular local government council, we are giving out to about over 5,000 households. Now that we have these restrictions, Mr. President has directed we give 2 months advance payments.
It's not just about the cash alone. It is a cash plus program. We give them money, we also train them on how to be self-sustaining.
This year's exercise kicked off in Kwali Area Council with 5,000 registered beneficiaries. Meanwhile, civil society organizations monitoring the implementation of the conditional cash transfer to the poorest of the poor Nigerians from the recovered looted funds and assets have commended the federal government for the commencement of cash support to vulnerable Nigerians.
It's a good gesture from the federal government, especially in this time that we're having COVID-19.
We are very appreciate his support. God will reward him and abundant blessing to them.
Now, as the federal government continues to distribute food and cash to vulnerable Nigerians across the country, joining us via Skype to speak on the effectiveness of government's social security net as palliative measures to COVID-19 is the Executive Director, Africa Network for Environment and Economic Justice, David Ogolo. Thank you for joining us on Business Express.
Yes, thank you very much.
So in the first place, who are the most vulnerable to be affected by the COVID-19 lockdown?
For again inviting me to participate in this your program, and I'm very happy to again throw light on the federal government palliative for the vulnerable ones among us. First, the federal government, with support from the World Bank, has the National Social Register designed by NASCO. NASCO is one of the government institutions that is responsible for the social safety net policy in the country. And it is from this National Social Register that the National NCT office mine the beneficiaries, the vulnerable ones that are currently receiving 20,000 naira as a result of the COVID pandemic in the country. Those who are currently benefiting from these palliatives are those whose names are included in the Nigerian Social Register. And we want to also remind the public that this money that is coming for the support for the vulnerable ones is 80% of it is coming from the recovered stolen asset by Abuja, which was recovered from Switzerland, which we all refer to as the Abuja to about $322.5 million, which is currently being distributed across the country. And so we were very happy recently after the president ordered the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to expedite action that will benefit the vulnerable ones among us. And the only viable framework in moving forward with that, in the absence of a database for the poor in the country, was the Nigerian Social Register. And I like to also say that the Nigerian Social Register is not being influenced by any political party or any government official.
We want to know how you see government's formula in this distribution of the economic palliatives.
Well, first, it's commendable that government have taken the decision to support the vulnerable ones among us. And if you look the actions of government around the world, different governments are coming out with economic stimulus on how to support business, support poor people, perhaps those who have also been affected as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. government are designing different framework. In the context of our country, we are happy that the president have also marked support through the NCTO to support the vulnerable ones among us. Now, what the National Cash Transfer Office is actually doing is, again, helping to build this framework across the country to make sure that those whose names are already in the beneficiary register, which was mined from the National Social Register, benefits from it. And now, will this help to solve the problem? Well, it will go a long way to help address fundamental issues, particularly against this lockdown. You know, the very poor are going to be affected mostly. Particularly, they don't have income, they don't have a visible means of living outside their primary benefit they were getting from this cash transfer. So with this 20,000 naira now given to them, they are able to deal with the challenge, and they are able to at least get some basic things that will enable them to overcome the challenge of COVID-19.
Okay. A good number of vulnerable Nigerians are not on this platform of conditional cash transfer. So as a professional, what steps do you suggest government should take to capture these other people who are not on this platform?
Again, some state governments have not, as we speak now, responded to the request of the National Cash Transfer Office to provide some level of infrastructure so that they can undertake this community-based targeting. Because some people have been asking questions, how are those who are currently benefiting, how were they identified? Now, it was a World Bank-led process, design process, that Nigeria government used a mechanism called community-based targeting, that they were used to target those people that names have appeared in the Nigerian Social Register. So the first thing I think that the Nigerian government have to do is to scale up the operation. Again, the capacity of NCTO to undertake this is a bit reduced in this phase of this challenge we are facing. Government can again put more resources to scale up their operation across the country. The state governments who have yet not put in place the infrastructure that will enable the NASCO to initiate the process to have their poor people enlisted into the Nigeria Social Register should also take the initiative to support NASCO so that that is carried out. Because without them signing on to the process, it will be difficult for the National Cash Transfer Office to come to, for example, in Lagos State, to start distributing money. For example, the things we have heard now in some of the state governments are not cooperating because of the lockdown. That for me is a big challenge. The state government should look for a way to help NCTO officials to make sure that the cash transfer, the 20,000 naira gets to the very poor people across their state. Otherwise, the very poor people will be victimized, and that will be a big challenge for the poor.
All right. There are some reactions that banks would have been in a better position to disburse the monies to these beneficiaries. What do you think about that?
The bank role is not to come and do distribution of cash to poor people in Nigeria. I think what the bank have done is to provide technical support for the Nigerian government and through the NASCO and the National Cash Transfer Office. Now, the National Social Safety Net Office, again, as the lead agency on this issue, it is very clear that they are able to take advantage of the technical support. And everywhere that the social protection policies are implemented around the world, particularly sub-Saharan African country, World Bank provides technical support. And as a country, you take advantage of that technical support to design the National Social Register, which Nigerian government have already done. And that for me is something that is very remarkable as we're beginning to demonstrate to the poor people of this country that government is putting priority on addressing the issue of poverty. And so the World Bank provided that technical support to the Nigerian government. That is what they can do. Nigerian government has a fundamental responsibility to support its poor people, to support the poor people in the country, to provide resources for the poor people, to design the mechanisms that will enable the poor people to access this opportunity in a way that it will not be politicized. What has happened in the last few weeks is that people think that what is coming out now is just COVID palliative. It is not. Government is yet to provide any money beyond the money that is coming from the Abacha loot. What we think that the government should do in the next few weeks is to increase the budget resources for the social protection project in Nigeria.
The federal government is pushing for increased financial inclusion. How do you think that these poor and vulnerable Nigerians can be captured into the financial net?
Again, I think if you look across sub-Saharan African countries, the money market is growing in an astronomical rate, and the Nigerian government need to create the infrastructure so that we can have the money market expanded in the country. More companies need to come into it, like Paga. We need more Paga in the country so that our poor people in the rural community, in the hard-to-reach area, can also benefit from some of government policy, like the social protection policy on the cash transfer program. And the government can also encourage the private banks and the commercial banks to come out with financial products that will also take into consideration the level of education and the issue of accessibility of the poor people across the country. Government has responsibility to create the enabling environment. And once government is able to create the enabling environment, I think the commercial banks will be able to come out with a product that will take into consideration our own peculiar situation. Take, for instance, communities that live in the coastal area, the people that live in the far northeast, like the IDPs. Those people need a special financial vehicle. Otherwise, whatever government is doing today will not benefit them, and that they can become a source of problem, and then those conflict entrepreneurs can take an advantage of that crisis to create maximum problem, particularly in this era of COVID-19. So I will encourage the federal government. First, they have done very well by mobilizing the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs to embark on this massive public awareness. But the next thing is that government need to earn the central bank, particularly with this private sector donation coming to the central bank. We need transparency and accountability. We need the government to put out a reporting framework that will enable the citizens to understand the contribution that central bank has received so far from the private sector. Where is the money going? And this is the same message we are also passing across to the Minister for Finance, that there should be transparency and accountability in all the resources received so far, so that the benefit.
We'll take our last question with you. Let's have your thoughts on the effectiveness of the conditional cash transfers and how far-reaching they will be on Nigeria's economy.
First, the conditional cash transfer is not just new in Nigeria. We have seen a number of different social protection projects embarked upon by different governments. But what is very unique in this conditional cash transfer is the role that civil society is playing. If you look now, when the countries, the Swiss government negotiated with the Nigerian government to return the $322.5 million to Nigeria, one of the conditions that the court ruled in Switzerland was for the Nigerian government to put in place a transparency mechanism. And that is what the Nigerian government have done by signing an MOU with civil society to keep an eye where the money is going. So government providing that transparent framework provides confidence in the system. And then the need for government to scale up more support. And this call should go to the National Assembly. In the face of the COVID-19, the National Assembly should look for a way to raise the resources that is going to the social protection budget line. And we should not just depend on foreign support. Government can demonstrate their political will that they are actually supporting the poor people across this country by raising the resources that is going for social protection. And government should also increase support to NASCO. They should increase support to the NCTO. These are the key institutions that have the mandate to disburse the cash transfer to the poor people across the country. And they should increase support, technical support to the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, so that they can have the requisite knowledge to carry out this assignment across the country, particularly in the face of the challenge we are facing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Ogolo, for your time with us on Business Express today. The federal government has threatened to sanction the distribution companies of Nigeria DISCOs on quality in power supply, issuing a 3-month ultimatum to that effect. This came as the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission (NEC) directed the DISCOs to finalize and submit their performance improvement plans for the period spanning 2017 to 2020. On the DISCO's performance, the Minister of Power, Mamman Saleh, said before the 3-month delay on the takeoff of the implementation of tariff measures, the DISCOs must be willing to supply meters, improve power supply, and agree on what is the reasonable tariff for consumers. It is cheery news for the global market as the price of international benchmark oil increased. The bench crude climbed $4.4 to $29.14 per barrel from less than $25 per barrel. The prices rose on Thursday after Saudi Arabia called for an emergency meeting of OPEC, Russia, and other oil producers known as OPEC to stabilize the oil market, which has been in turmoil since a deal on supply curbs collapsed and Riyadh began pumping extra crude into an oversupplied market. U.S. President Donald Trump had said Saudi Arabia and Russia would ease pressure on oil, ending a price war that has contributed to crude's massive plunge. And gold prices dropped on Friday after rising 1.4% in the previous session as the U.S. dollar firmed. How are the commodities pricing on the global market? Talking stocks, at the end of trade, the all-share index dropped by 0.13%, while market capitalization reduced to 10.99 trillion naira. The all-share index closed at 21,094.62 basis points. Investors exchanged 235 million shares valued at 2.978 billion naira, and all the transactions were traded in 3,988 deals. FBN Holdings, GT Bank, and UBA were the most active to boost market turnover. European stocks dropped as coronavirus cases hit 1 million worldwide. Amina Nujem takes it up from here.
U.S. stocks gained despite more data showing millions of Americans losing their jobs. The Dow Jones advanced 2.24%, trading at 21,413.44. The Nasdaq Composite appreciated 1.72%, as well as the S&P that was up 2.28% in early trading. European stocks opened lower as global coronavirus cases topped 1 million. The FTSE 100 declined 1.07%, while the German DAX was down 0.56%, as well as the CAC 40. In Asia, stocks fell on Friday after Wall Street gained for the first time in 3 days on stronger oil prices, despite enduring uncertainty about how long the global economic decline due to the coronavirus pandemic will last. Nikkei slipped 0.2%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell 0.19%, and the Shanghai Composite declined 0.6%. Now back home in Africa, the markets were showing mixed sentiments. South Africa's top 40 declined by 1.52%. Tunisia's Tunidex dropped 2.33%, as well as Ghana's JSE. Namibia Overall Index and Kenya's All-Share Index. That's Global Market Report.
In other business news, the torrent of Americans filing for unemployment insurance skyrocketed last week as more than 6.6 million new claims were filed. The Labor Department says that this brings to 10 million the total Americans who filed over the past 2 weeks. This is coming 1 week after 3.3 million filings were recorded in the first wave of what has been recorded shattering swellings of the jobless ranks. With that, we end this episode of the program. Don't forget you can access all previous episodes on YouTube, and you can communicate with us on Twitter. The handle is @NTA News Now. The hashtag is BizX. We value your feedback, so do join us again on Monday for another package. As we continue the fight against COVID-19, remember to keep social distance while the lockdown is still in force. Also, wash your hands with soap under running water. I am Muplang Dakok.